So, Texas grid, topic of conversation, precisely because of what happened recently with the shutdowns, or rather outages. Let's say that, not shutdowns, outages that happened out here. I'm in Texas. For those of you that are new, for some reason don't know, I am in Texas. I'm right north of Dallas. I am in Texas, and my outage situation was rolling. I never went without probably 4 hours at a time without power, and it was probably an hour on average that it was out. So it'd be like an hour on off, and then it'd be on for a little bit there. And that time that it was on, my electricity, it would stay on longer as time went on. So I can't remember what day this started, was Monday or whatever, that kind of this went down. And then by Wednesday, so that's the 17th, that night, it has not been off since. Now, my experience isn't the experience, and the reason why I'm saying that, because it's important. Unfortunately, a lot of people, disingenuous liars, that are looking at the situation and think that what happened, for example, in Austin, which seemed to get hit the worst, happened everywhere in Texas. I believe the peak was 3 million people that were out of power, which is a lot. And of course, we'll get into some of that information here in a little bit, but that's a lot of people. There's 28 or 29, damn near 30 million people in Texas, for those of you that want to keep track of this and understand how big it actually is. No, it was not a situation where the entire state was out of power. And I'm not even talking about this part of the state like El Paso that may be part of the Western interconnection. No, like there are people that were actually in Texas, part of the Texas grid, depending on where they were at, that never had any problem at all, right? It wasn't representative of the entire state or the entire specific electrical grid. But let these fools tell you, precisely people out of town, let them tell you, well, this is what happens. Now, see, that's what I want to talk about, though. Let's tap into the psyche of these weirdos. You wonder, why on earth are they ragging on Texas right now? Why? Like, what in the world? Because they think that it proves some sort of point that decentralization is bad. But more importantly, what they do, the reason why they're sheep and they hate Texas so much is because Texas is one of the more independent states when it comes to the federal government in the USA at large, precisely with its electrical grid. Because it has its own. It's not connected to the West or the East. So any event that they can demonize that particular independence, that's exactly what they're going to do. This is the first time. Do you guys not understand? This is the first time something like this has ever happened. Do you guys not understand that? Like, I have been living here 29 years. Okay? This has never happened. Ever. What happened with this situation has never happened. No, it didn't happen in the 2011, this winter storm that people like talking. No, that never happened to this large of scale where you're talking about this winter storm virtually hits the entire state. Right? Like, for those that don't know, in North Texas, we get snow. Like, we don't get it like all the time, but we get snow. We're more likely to get snow. In South Texas, that's almost unheard of. They get that once every blue moon, and it's happened to be one of them. You're talking about a very unique situation. But they hate Texas so much because, again, in terms of its electrical grid, among other things, is detached from the feds. Now, it doesn't mean that it's not regulated by the feds. See, that's one of the dishonest things that people were saying. Well, this happens because of deregulation or something like that. And I'm sitting here like, that doesn't even make sense. Number one, ERCOT, we already know is it is basically the regulatory arm of when it comes to the electrical load, right? It is its entire policy direction comes by way of the Public Utility Commission of Texas. Again, I'm not here to give you the opinions here. I'm just going to give you the facts, right? People have served on its board. Not just with them, but also obviously part of the Public Utility Commission of Texas. People that have been Democrats, people that have been Republicans. So it's neither here nor there. They have been under the direct. So it's not like a completely privatized electrical load where however they decide to generate the power, they get to keep it. They get to decide. Every private institution gets to decide that. That's not how it works. It's not how it's ever worked, right? The dispersed sort of how the electrical load in terms of how it's dispersed to these private institutions or private individuals or private companies is dictated by way of ERCOT. Not my opinion. That's just what the facts. So the way you can even tell that if you just use your context clues is the fact that there's a rolling blackout that can affect a big part of Texas. Why do you think that can even happen? Oh, because there's a centralized body that gets to dictate. This is why I kept showing you guys all the receipts. When it came to this situation, I showed you guys the receipts on these companies that would just straight up tell you that was the case. They would tell you that that's the case. They would sit up there and tell you that was the case. You're looking at, as an example, CenterPoint right now. ERCOT declared there was a statewide power generation shortfall. And then right here, as you say, they're required to comply with the directives of ERCOT. This is why these companies were doing the rolling blackouts. It wasn't because they themselves wanted to do it. No, it was because, again, the regulatory wing in combination with the Public Utility Commission of Texas, as well as ERCOT, required them to do it. Centralized. That's why. That quasi-fascism that I'm always telling you guys about. But they don't like the fact that it's detached from the larger grids. Though, as I mentioned earlier before, how it works out here, right? In terms of the electrical load, it's different place to place in terms of how this rolling blackout occurred. And you know how, before I get to that, you know how the rolling blackout was so unique? Because it also happened by way of the Southwest Power Pole, right? Which is connected to, or rather more so connected to the feds. They had rolling blackouts for the same exact storm in 14 states. Don't take my word for nothing. Go look it up. And they themselves said this is unprecedented. We've never had to do this. It's almost like, well, yeah, such a unique situation. Unique things happen. Right? But this is why I encourage you to ask the question. When someone says, and this is what they present, you got Chink, that dipstick from Young Turks, and everybody talk, well, this is the smaller government. This is because of you guys aren't connected to the larger grids. And they say that's because, they weren't winterized, these terms that they like to use. And this is what I encourage you to ask them. This is a simple question. What specific regulation, federal regulation, would have required them to do what you're saying that they needed to do? And they never can find it. You know why? Because they're simply repeating what they heard someone else say. And that's my frustration with a lot of people, not just with this issue, but in this country, period, is that they don't know how to think. And this is why I'm asking you to think. This is why when I say stuff, definitely when I say stuff with confidence, I don't say, listen to me. A lot of you do, and that's fine. But you don't have to. You can go look it up for yourself. Right? See, a lot of folks don't know how to think. So all they do is repeat what they heard someone else say. You ask, just out of curiosity, since you're saying that this would have been avoided had they been part of the main two interconnections in the West and on the East. And had they done that, they would have been regulated and they would have been winterized and all of this sort of stuff. What specific federal regulation are you referring to? They're like, and they malfunction right there because they're NPCs. They're repeating what they heard someone else say. The academics, they love to roll those guys out. People that aren't even connected to the situation. Fools are an associate professor at the University of Texas in freaking Austin or something like that. And, according to my calculations, like, fools not even connected to the situation, but here we are, right? And they'll roll them out there, and because they said it, it must be true. This is why I'm always saying that academics are the most protected wing, or not protected wing, though they are a protected wing. They are the most protected of the state. They always roll them out there to validate their position. Number one, they're funded by way of them, but they always roll them out, and they will always suggest that, well, because they are anything is not connected to some larger, even more centralized. It doesn't mean that the Texas grid isn't centralized in terms of how it handles its electrical load and who is the ultimate authority there. That's not what I'm saying, because we know that exists. They want it to be even more centralized. There is not any problem that these sheep ass leftists will look at and not blame on deregulation. They think that they can regulate, tax, and spin their way out of every single situation. Every single one. Every single one. There's not a damn thing that they could point to that they'll say, well, okay, even if the regulatory body fails, which is the hilarious thing, the regulatory body fails, and then they still blame deregulation. They can't tell you how, they can't tell you why, but it's just the fault. Yeah, if we just had more regulation, see, this would have been resolved. Like I said, this operates under this moronic assumption anyway that when it comes to the East and the West, and the blackouts that have been impacting those instances. I'm not talking about like with the East, Upper East Coast. Y'all remember that blackout that impacted like 40-something million people back in like 2003. I'm not even referring to that. I'm saying on the regular, right? They get blackouts for various multitude of different reasons. California, this is what was hilarious when I saw this this guy, I don't know how every take that I see from this man, he's saying something incredibly stupid. Like this crackhead chink says, only upside of Texas power outages is people like Joe Rogan, who are so proud of California to leave California and move to Texas, freezing their asses off. They said they wanted less government. Congrats, mission accomplished. I hope you are not asking the government to come to help you. As if the government, number one, isn't involved. But he has nerve to refer to California. California notoriously has rolling blackouts in the summer. Not my opinion, right? They have this all the time, right? Specifically in the summer. But even when it comes to electrical issues, it's hilarious that someone would bring up California. Even when the whole damn state, well, not the whole state, a good portion of it is on fire due to electrical failures. You mean to tell me you're going to have nerve to try to point to Texas? They want you to completely ignore that because the feds can do no wrong. They just want you to pretend like it doesn't happen. It's like this textbook form of gaslighting. They will ignore all of that, all of the instances that we have that happens more often than what it happens in Texas. And again, it wasn't, at least for my experience, it wasn't like it was this extended period of time. Like we're doing the show right now. And for almost 2 days, my power has been up. It goes to show that it has not been a universal thing where the entire state was just out of power. No, that isn't what happened. But don't let the facts get in your way. Sheep repeat what they heard other people say because they don't know how to think. So what it is that they do, someone that validated their preconceived nonsensical notion, that is that you cannot have independence. If you have independence bad. They don't like independence. So what do? In the event they could try to point to where there was an issue there, every issue that happens is solely because of the independence. Now, again, it's also functionally false to assume that even when it comes to the electrical grid and how Texas handles its electrical load, it's not under any federal regulation. That is complete and utterly false. Texas, for example, had to ask permission to maximize the generation of power. And this, again, not my opinion, right before the storm hit. So this is around like the 14th. They had to add permission from the feds, ask them for permission to maximize their electrical, most of their output, the generation, because it got in the way of this regulatory bodies when it comes to the emissions. They had to ask for permission. So I'm sitting here like, what? Where have you gotten off thinking that is just completely not regulated at all? It is, to the degree that maybe the east and west interconnections, maybe not. But again, all they needed to see was that it was Texas. It has its own electrical grid detached from the main interconnections. Therefore, this happens because of that. Does it have to make sense? No, doesn't. It's just they wanted to point to that because they hate independence. Definitely for guys like myself, including Texas, which will be the spot that is most likely of a lot of these states to detach from these idiots, from the union, which I'm still shouting at from the mountaintop. This changes nothing. You do understand that, right? It changes absolutely nothing. And this is the last thing that I'm going to say on this. As I mentioned before, we do not have in Texas a completely privatized, deregulated body when it comes to, or just geographical area when it comes to electricity or how they generate energy. Period. Not my opinion. This is just what the facts show. Okay. So with that being said, I'm going to show you guys something real quick. I'm going to pull this up. This is coming up right before my power came back on, by the way. And you're looking at this and you see that with the wind output right before the storm hit kind of went to the crapper. Natural gas had to go up. Coal was pretty steady. Nuclear was pretty steady. There's some slight dippage right here, but aside from that, they were pretty steady. And I'm not here to tell you what forms of energy that you should want and all of that. What I'm here to tell you is that we don't have even a marketized way of energy generation. Not even just with handling the electrical load. I'm talking about just a generation of energy, or rather electricity, and what form of energy it rather comes from. We don't have that. It is one of the most subsidized markets in this state, right? So the market is already muddy in the first place. It's not like it's left completely free. No. Right? No, it's not. They even brag about stuff like more so the wind and how so much energy is being generated by Texas that comes from wind. They'd be bragging about that because it's subsidized. Hell, even with their plans going in the future, it's more wind. It's more turbines. It's not like anybody can just say, well, okay, I want to generate energy that is nuclear, and they could just do it. No, that's not how it works. And some forms of energy, particularly wind, now has the benefit of being subsidized, planned by way of the state and its regulators and its government that decides the direction that it goes. It's not like it's left completely up to the market and the best form of energy wins. That's not how it works. It's not how it's ever worked. But again, why let the facts get in your way when you could just sit up and perpetuate this nonsense? Oh, well, if they would have been more green, they would have avoided this. Like, God damn it, shut up. The wind turbines froze too. And then they'll say, again, they're NPCs, so they just repeat what someone else said. Well, look at Alaska and look at all these other places that have wind turbines. They're still operating. They're not winterized. Well, you dipshit, the same thing can be said about coal and natural gas. You don't think other very cold nations and very cold areas don't have forms of energy that are coming from way of natural gas and coal that are really cold in those areas? No, so the same thing can be said about that. But again, why allow the facts to get in your way when you can just make shit up? But they're sheep. Look, guys, I'm not telling you what to think. I will always give you my opinion and I'll give you my position on certain things, of course. But I'm not going to tell you how to think. I can't do that. All I'm asking you, I'm just requesting of you, just for the sake of your own self. Think for yourself. You don't have to just sit up here and take everybody's word for everything. Think. And you'll see, but when this information started first coming out, I'm seeing these academics get rolled out, and Texas Tribune is getting all these people to discuss this. I'm sitting here like, okay, I keep hearing this lack of federal regulation. Nobody's pointing to the specific. What are they talking about? And so again, you'll have someone. If you look at my Twitter, for example, I'm going back and forth with people, and I'm asking a specific question: what specific regulation are you referring to that would have stopped this from happening when it comes to the lack of winterized equipment? When it comes to this whole scenario, they can't tell you because they don't know. All they're doing is repeating what they heard someone else say. I can't teach you how to think, guys. I can only ask that you do think. But sheep, they don't want to think. They just want their opinions validated. And therefore, if someone does validate it, especially if it's coming from a place of authority with the blue check mark, they will listen to them. They'll give you charts, and they won't even look at, well, this person said it, therefore it must be true, and there's no holes in their argument. I cannot teach you how to think. I can only request that you do, and you do it for yourself.